The last few weeks, we went through mostly Guanyin practices about emanating the mantras into our bodies, subsequently shining it into others, creating those energies, those mantras, projecting them into others. The reason we're able to do that is because we were meditating into what is pure and what is sublime. That's really within our own mind stream. That's why we're able to do that. And when the mind is pure, it can emanate, it can radiate light. But when the mind is dull or dark or deluded, and that is what you will produce for others. As some of you have shared, you were trying to practice on the ego, and the ego is none other than a view. And we suffer because of our views. We can even cause others to suffer. We can create problems because of our views. And our views are our greatest shortcomings. The world has been moving very fast. Everything is changing rapidly, especially in the digital space. So that also shows how fast it's moving, and we might not be able to keep up with this pace. Then what does that tell us? Are we supposed to fight it or resist it or try to flow with it? It's not that. It's about trying to understand that that's actually also how fast our minds can change and how fixed our viewpoints can be. That's why some of us fail to adapt. Some of us thrive in change. And those who harp onto the past of how things were like before, trying to revolutionize back into the past, those are the ones that suffer the most. Those are the ones that go on strikes, protests, and riots. Those are the ones that cause problems at home because they are just not willing to adapt to change. Those are the ones that when you travel together with on a vacation, who will get really, really upset because the hotel has changed or the itinerary has changed. See? So why some suffer and why some thrive? And that is because of the attachment to our views, not willing to relinquish certain views on the things. And when we are so attached to views, we have delusion. And then we have aversion. We start to reject, we start to push away things, even when the truth is right in front of you. It's like, no, I refuse to see it. And the thing is that the truth is not always blissful. It's not always positive. But it's how we want to learn to adapt that can make our lives positive. And that is why we are always cultivating. We're cultivating our minds. Cultivating our minds to learn to renounce ideas. You see, we are not monks, we're not monastics. Early on, we were just downstairs, some of us were chatting with Master. He was saying that a few of his devotees in this temple, they are going to join the rains retreat with a very eminent monk, a forest monk. For 3 months, they can go through a short-term ordination. That's a form of renunciation. Letting go of beauty of the hair and the eyebrows in Thailand because they have to shave the eyebrows there, letting go of material comforts. But most important of all is that they also have to learn to let go of their views of how they want things to be and let go of their attachments to certain outcomes. So renunciation is not just outside, it's not just external, say, okay, I can give this up, I can give that up. It's about what can we let go of within ourselves, because holding on to them creates suffering. And even holding on to our suffering or holding on to our anger, our sadness is prolonging suffering. So of course, when our ego is in the way, it has resentment, it has aversion, it likes to reject things. It doesn't want to see the truth, it doesn't want to align with truth. There's already suffering that's already there. So the practice is very simple. Early on, we were having a short discussion with Ken. He doesn't like the 3Ds, 5 7 10, 12, 27, 37 things in Buddhism. Because Buddhism, a lot of things is being classified, right? 3 precepts, the 3 seals of Buddhism, or 4 seals, the 5 faculties, the 5 powers which we went through recently, 7 factors of enlightenment leading to 37, and the 12 links of interdependent origination, the 5 aggregates that we always talk about. No? There's just so much. Buddha had 2 things actually, suffering and the end of suffering. It's as simple as that. And if we can learn to look into it, the Buddha said he only taught 2 things only. The suffering, what is suffering? And how to end that suffering. The problem is that sometimes when we experience dukkha, we experience suffering, we are unaware. We wait till the entire karmic cycle has come to fruition, and then we think that we suffer, which means that we feel that our lives have been threatened because the mind is not stable. There might be some anxiety, sadness, anger, feelings of guilt, fear. You see, suffering was being prolonged until it's obvious and huge enough that it blows up in our face. It's like, there's suffering. But the fact is that it has really started before because of our views, what's in our minds, how we're viewing the world. And if we can catch that, then we can end suffering right there and then, because we know that suffering has a cause. And the cause is always our cravings for certain outcomes, the desire for certain things not to manifest in our lives. That is suffering in itself. That is dukkha. So when we practice meditation, we talk about formal practice at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, when we sit. It is also to allow ourselves to introspect. Am I carrying suffering in me? Am I actually experiencing dukkha in my life today that might have gone unnoticed? Because they are still going to be there if we don't address them, if we don't look at them. So by and by, as we practice and we can look into ourselves, we can look into our minds, we can look into dukkha, that's where we can end it, because we know it comes from our cravings. It comes from a very deluded way of thinking, not accepting truth. And what is truth? I'm not talking about Dharma truth. I'm talking about what's in front of us, what is manifesting in our lives right now. Maybe you're at a place that you feel that you can't sit and meditate. You feel that you're in certain circumstances in your life that does not allow you to have me time, does not allow you to practice. Yes, there are some obstacles, but those are physical obstacles. But the practice can still be there because you don't choose the setting, what's outside of you. You can't choose. But you can choose whether you want to apply your own teachings at that point of time. You can choose if you want to be in touch with the truth and how you're going to practice with that truth. And that in itself is the flow of the Dharma that you can get into, to notice that is it the ego that is reacting? Is it the ego that is thinking? Then you will see the attachments, cravings, and all that. The whole mass of suffering is there. And that's where you can learn to release, to let go. And that's it. It is that simple. Like the Buddha said, I only teach two things only, suffering and the end of suffering. But the question might come, is meditation important? Yes, meditation is important. It allows you to generate your mindfulness. It allows you to have a still mind, to reflect. But when we don't have time to meditate, we need to remember that we have time to breathe. We have time to introspect. And that's how we can liberate ourselves from the endless cycle of deluded thinking. So when we talk about what we have been practicing the last 2 weeks, emanating the mantras in you and then emanating it into others, you are emanating loving kindness, self-love, compassion, equanimity, wisdom, a renunciation of ideas of how things should be. And that's why you could manifest those mantras into others. How about times when we are unmindful, when we have deluded thinking, when we are harping onto certain views that we have, or certain identities, thinking that you're a savior, thinking that you're in charge of the lives of others. We are never in charge of people's lives. Never. You can be in charge of a project or a system. You might be able to influence someone's life for better or for worse, but you're never ever in charge of someone's life. The moment we think that we are in charge of someone's reaction, someone's transformation, that's when we give our energy away for no purpose, because it's not going to be well received. And it also means that we forget that we are in charge of ourselves. We toss that outside. And that's why we can feel tired, can feel exhausted, we can feel beaten. And that's because of our views. You see, when it's not a mantra that we're generating or sending to others, it becomes our views that we're generating and sending to others. And we allow it to proliferate, these delusions. And that's why conflicts can happen in life. Or when you assume something about someone, it is an assumption. And we forget to check whether it's a deluded form of thinking. And then we start projecting them onto others, and we start seeing others in the wrong light. Then we're not really seeing the person who's in front of us anymore. And the thing is that sometimes over-worry is a problem as well, right? Over-worrying is also another form of anxiety, another form of dukkha. We are afraid how others might think. We are afraid about the well-being of others. We are afraid of people making mistakes. No, that's the worst. Right? That if they make any changes in their lifestyle, and then we start to fear for them, thinking that they will lead to the path of ruin, when we already know that the future is uncertain. But then we start to worry. Why do we want to worry about their future? And with our worry, it means we stop seeing them. We stop seeing them for their truest potential. And our opinions might not necessarily block their way yet, block their path, but it has already blocked our vision of who that person is. And we miss those life's precious moments. So when we talk about, when you all shared about doing our best to practice, to let go of the ego or the sense of self, we don't need a grandiose idea of what the sense of self is or what we read in the scriptures, but we can look at when the self is operating. That's where we need to catch ourselves if you really want to practice on that. And one great opportunity for us is when we have our check-ins and our sharings. Because that's a time where we learn that we're going to put away our judgments of our fellow Dharma brothers and sisters, our Dharma spiritual siblings. We put all the preconceived notions aside. You might be talking to some on a very daily, regular basis, but we know that when it's time for them to share, you're going to put everything you know about them aside. And you want to offer the space to them, to listen without judgment, to listen with compassion, listen just for the sake of deep listening and not about advice giving. You honor the person just as what the person wants to say. And that's why it also allows you, that setting allows you to just speak your heart freely without any fear for judgment. Of course, if you have a fear of judgment, people judging you, it meant that your mind might have certain notions also when people are sharing. And that's why I always find these sharing circles very powerful, because it is a practice in itself. Whether you can be authentic or not, it doesn't matter. The thing is that it helps you to look into your mind. Am I judging myself? Am I judging others? Am I judging others? Am I judging myself? Am I truly being compassionate? It's an inter-being kind of practice. So this is something that we can dive in to look at. To practice the Dharma, of course, it will be great if we have the right setting all the time. But the thing is that none of us have decided to become monks or nuns or to give up everything and go somewhere to cultivate in the wilderness or in nature. We didn't do that. We might travel just to get into nature, but the thing is that we need to know those traveling does not take up the most of our living days. We all still have responsibilities. We're not always living in those circumstances. So it's nice to go for those travels or to attend a retreat, because it teaches us how to make the best of our times over there, to give us that reset, to teach us how are we going to adjust our lifestyles when we're back to the real life that we are living, to make those small little changes. You get recharged, you come back, you re-energize. Just like when we come for our Wednesdays, you get nourished in your consciousness, you learn something about yourself, you get inspired, or you start to learn from other people's sharing, and then you take it, and then tomorrow is Thursday, you have another chance to be back, to do better. So that's it, to get in touch, deeply in touch within ourselves, and knowing that we have to stop certain kinds of mental proliferation, and also It's important when we can adopt a mantra that we can always use the mantra to keep ourselves mindful, to keep ourselves in the present moment. Okay. It can be Namo Sigato, it can be Om Mani Padme Hum, it can be any short form of mantra that when you have nothing to do, you just recite it in your head, reminding yourself that there is the deluded mind and there's also the pure mind. I'm not saying become the pure mind immediately, but just recite it. As weeks and months goes by, you start to understand the importance of it, the significance of it, of using a mantra to just repeat it in your head when you have nothing else to do. And that becomes our power